This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence. Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be speaking all about Japanese literature and Japanese novels. Now this particular video is very long overdue. Essentially I was waiting until A Year in Tokyo was released before I made this video because in my brain these two things are thematically linked. So yeah, if you're new here, hello, my name is Christy and about 2 weeks ago I released an illustrated Tokyo guide and memoir called A Year in Tokyo. There's a whole bunch of cool stuff in there like neighborhood guides, guides to my favorite bookshops and museums in Tokyo, cultural and folklore anecdotes, stories about what it was like to be an English teacher. So if you're interested in Japan, particularly in Tokyo, particularly in books set in Tokyo, you might like A Year in Tokyo, which is now available on my website as an ebook. Let's get into actually speaking about the Japanese books I have sitting next to me. Now every time I say Japanese books, I get worried that people are going to think I mean like Minna no Nihongo, not Japanese language. These are going to be books written by Japanese authors translated into English. And today I have 10 books. Well, I mean, technically I have 11 books, but I didn't want this particular author to take up more than one slot. So there's 10 books, but really there's 11 books anyway. Let's get into the video and I can start recommending you my favorite Japanese novels. The very first one is Moshi Moshi by Banana Yoshimoto. This book is set in Shimokitazawa, which is kind of close to where I used to live in Tokyo. That was the main draw card for me and the reason I wanted to pick it up in the first place, but I was absolutely delighted by how beautifully told this story is. It's very short, it's very concise, and it's about a young woman who loses her father. And so it's a story about grief and how she comes to terms with her grief. This young woman is in her early 20s, and it also explores the relationship she has with her mother, who now needs to understand this new identity she has in the world as a widow. It's set in 2010, which is kind of before Shimokita started getting really like popular and touristy. It was very hipster, if no one uses the word hipster anymore, but like you get the vibe. There's a lot of like record stores and, you know, independent cafes. It's a really cool place. I loved reading this novel. I loved the setting. I loved the emphasis on food. I just thought it was such a lovely little story. The blurb of the story makes it sound like it's going to be a ghost story or that there's going to be some sort of like paranormal or speculative element to it. Don't go in expecting that because you're going to be disappointed. It really is a realistic contemporary novel, but it's a beautifully told one. I really enjoyed it, and as I said, I particularly love the imagery and the setting of Shimokitazawa. Book number 2 on this list is Strange Weather in Tokyo by Haruki Murakami. This is my favorite book that I've read so far by Haruki Murakami. It's again a very small one. It's a story about a woman who is in her 40s who is going to an izakaya, which is kind of like a bar where people drink and they have like little like snack foods and stuff like yakitori. And she bumps into one of her old teachers from when she was in high school. He's now in his 70s and she can't remember his name to begin with, so she just refers to him as sensei. And this story follows on from there and explores their kind of unconventional relationship which develops. It did take a little bit for the book to hook me in, but by the end I was really enjoying it. I really liked the profound and quite sweet relationship that the main character develops with sensei. It's a good, sweet little concise story set in Tokyo, and I really liked the wholesome relationship between the main character and the sensei character as well. Book number 3 is The Forest of Wool and Steel by Natsu Miyashita. This is such a sweet little book, and I've never heard anyone else but me speak about this book. It's such a beautiful, meditative, slow little story. There's not a lot of plot here, so if your main thing that you love about books is a lot of plot, a lot of things happening, probably not the book for you. However, I really enjoyed this. It was very calming, it was very slow, and it's a story about a young man whose dream is to become a piano tuner. Every time I say that, I picture like a piano with a tuner on it. No, like with my accent, tuner and tuner are the same thing. I really love this book. I love the cover. It's such a lovely like hardback cover. I bought this book from the bookstore on the bottom right hand side of Shinjuku Station, which is one of the bookstores I recommend in the Tokyo guide that I wrote. That is genuinely a very good bookstore. It's Books Kinokuniya Shinjuku, right above Nitori. There's a lot of books by Japanese novelists that are translated into English that I never find anywhere else. It's a really good spot to go book shopping if you're into Japanese literature. But anyway, back on task. I really enjoyed this book. There's a lot of really wonderful natural imagery in here, and it sort of considers how the wood in the forest where the trees are grown is going to affect the way the piano sounds. It looks at interconnectedness, and it's set in Hokkaido, which is northern Japan, so there's a lot of really lovely snowy imagery here. And really the story just follows our main character as he learns to become a piano tuner and his relationships with his clients who are all like getting their pianos tuned at different points, and it's a really sweet, meditative, slow little story that I really enjoy. If you want something calm and wholesome and comforting to read, I definitely recommend this book. Book number 4 is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. This is a very popular one that I've seen a lot of people recommend, and there's a really good reason why. The main character is so interesting in this book. It's a very short book. I think it's definitely the shortest book on this list. Like, you can read it in a couple or maybe like a few hours. And that's my only real criticism for Convenience Store Woman, is that I wish it was longer. I wish it had a little bit more depth. However, I did really enjoy it. Convenience Store Woman is a novel about a woman in her 30s whose name is Keiko. She works in a convenience store or combini, and at the very least, this is my reading of it. I think that Keiko is a non-neuronormative protagonist. I think that she has a lot of indicators that could suggest that she's potentially on the autism spectrum. And so I found her psychology, I found the way that she looks at the world incredibly interesting. She looks at the convenience store as being like an aquarium. She navigates the world by trying to copy the mannerisms of other people that she sees because she wants to fit in, she wants to make her family happy. And so her life is a constant act of performance in which she's always trying to make everything seem like she is normal, like she's the same as other people, that she looks at the world in a really unique way. I think that really is the main strength of Convenience Store Woman. I really enjoyed her character and I found it so interesting and so strong. I loved how unapologetically unempathetic she was at times. You know, that's not something we get to see a lot, particularly with female characters. Anyway, I very much enjoyed Convenience Store Woman. Again, I wish it was a little bit longer. I wish it had a little bit more depth, but otherwise it was a really unique story and a very enjoyable one as well. Now, before we jump into the rest of the recommendations, I just wanted to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Squarespace. Squarespace is a website builder which allows people to create dynamic and stunning websites with ease. I mentioned in last week's video that I recently got to set up my shop on my website. It was the easiest process in the world, and I'm so happy with how it turned out. Squarespace makes it super streamlined to connect with the people who are interested in the things that you make. In addition to being affordable and easy to use, Squarespace has loads of benefits, from fabulous e-commerce features to powerful analytics tools. If you're looking to make a website, head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/ChristyAnnJones to save 10% off your purchase of a website or domain. Now we are up to book number 5 on this list, and this is the one where I felt like I didn't want to recommend 2 books for the same author, and so I decided to shove both of these books into slot number 5 on this video. This is the author who's definitely traumatized me the most on this list, and if you haven't already guessed it, it is Haruki Murakami. How could we possibly have a video that recommends novels by Japanese authors without including Haruki Murakami? He's like definitely the most popular and probably successful novelist to come out of Japan, and by a lot of Japanese people, he's considered to be a very Western influenced author, and so it makes sense that his books have a lot of appeal for people in the West. The 2 books that I want to recommend to you guys today from Haruki Murakami are Norwegian Wood and also The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. I've spoken about both of these books to death on my channel. Because these books are so famous and so well known, I'm not going to harp on about them for ages, but this first one, Norwegian Wood, is a coming-of-age story. It's a bildungsroman set in 1960s Tokyo during the time of the significant student protests that were going on. This story follows our main character whose name is Toru Watanabe as he navigates grief, concerns to do with his friends, dealing with love, and really just sort of, it's a realistic book. It's not magical realism or anything like that, but it really is a coming of age story for Toru. I think you could argue that this is a dark academia book. There's a lot of dark things in this, and there's a lot of literary references in this, so I do think it actually falls into like the dark academia category. And also the book that has traumatized me the most, The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. Because of this book, I'm terrified of I'm also terrified of like the desert in Mongolia. So that is the legacy this book leaves in my brain. The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle is this epic, labyrinthine, sprawling story, which is a magical realism story about a main character whose name is also Toru, not in any way related. They apparently Haruki Murakami just really likes this first name for male characters. This is a story about a man who I believe is a paralegal. He quits his job because he's not really sure what he wants in life. He's currently unemployed. He lives in Tokyo during the summertime, his cat goes missing. He decides to go looking for his cat, and then his wife goes missing, and the story sort of follows on from there. There's a lot of very interesting, surreal things that happen. There's a lot of dipping in and out of dreams, tunnels all over the city. It's, as I've said, labyrinthine, winding, it's all over the place. But the beautiful thing about Haruki Murakami is that his stories are so atmospheric. The imagery is so strong. He's definitely my favorite author on this list from a writing perspective. Like, I love the way that Haruki Murakami writes. He's so talented. There's a reason why he's so very popular. Lots of content warnings in both of these books. Lots of problematic stuff in both of these books. So if you're a person who needs content warnings, please go look them up before reading either of these. Book number 6 on this list is Sweet Bean Paste by Dorian Sukagawa. I did not expect to have my heart absolutely stomped on by this book. I expected to read a sweet little book about a dorayaki seller who may be set in the spring because of the sakura that's on the cover of this book. This book ended up being a lot more profound than I had realized it was going to be. It taught me a lot about a specific subject, which I'm not going to spoil for you because it is a significant spoiler for the book, but it gave me a lot of depth into this area of history that I didn't know anything about really in this context. That's the vaguest sentence I've ever really said about a book on this channel. I'm very sorry. Sweet Bean Paste is a book about a man whose name is Sentaro, and he works in a dorayaki stall. Dorayaki are these like really yummy little pancake thingies that have fillings inside them. They're kind of like taiyaki but round instead. And Sentaro has not really had an easy life. He has a criminal record. He's now working in this dorayaki stall, and he meets an elderly woman whose name is Tokue, who makes this amazing red bean paste, the filling for dorayaki. And the book sort of follows on from there as their relationship develops. There are bits of this set during sakura season, and the imagery is really beautiful. I did really enjoy it. I thought it was really emotionally impactful and a very good, sweet, short little book. Book number 7 on this list is a book that I very much did cry while reading, and it is The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa. I think this is the most I've cried while reading a book aside from Pachinko and The Song of Achilles. I have told this particular story a number of times, so I'm sorry if you've already heard it before. When I was listening to this book, I was still working in marketing, and I was sitting at my desk listening to the audiobook of this, and I was just sobbing into my food. Like, I had to stop listening to it because I was like, if one of my coworkers comes up to me to ask me a question, they're gonna be like, what are you doing? Are you okay? And so this book was absolutely devastating in the best kind of way. It is a story about a man who's going on a road trip with his cat. The cat is the narrator of the story. The cat's name is Nana because his tail is shaped like the Japanese character for 7, and that is all I'm willing to tell you about the plot. It's genuinely so brilliant. There's a lot of really wonderful natural imagery in this book as they're driving across Japan. The book also follows the relationships of the main character with people from his past, and so there's a lot of character development here and character journeys. It's a beautifully told story. As I said, very sad, and I cannot recommend the audiobook enough for this one. I thought the audiobook was brilliant. They picked a narrator that sounded so much like a sassy cat being snide about everything. It was absolutely brilliant. I love this book. I cannot recommend it enough. Book number 8 on this list is probably my favorite book on this list. No, it's not number 1 or number 10. That would require some sort of planning, but just because I really love the themes of this, I love that it's a speculative book, I love that there's magic in it, and this book is The Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mizuki Tsujimura. This is a story set between Tokyo and a secondary world. It is a portal fantasy, and the portal in this particular book is a mirror. The main character's name is Kokoro, and she is pulled through the mirror into the lonely castle by a little girl wearing a wolf mask, where she meets a whole bunch of other teenagers. I believe they're in middle school, or rather junior high school, and the thing they have in common is that none of them go to school. And they're given this task by the little girl in the wolf mask to find this key. Whoever finds the key has their wish come true. However, the second the key is found, the castle disappears for everyone. I really do love this story from an aesthetic perspective. I love the references to fairy tales. I love that it's a YA in translation, which is not a type of book I get to read very often. But what really struck me was the ending of this book. The book was good the whole way through, but it wasn't excellent until we got to the very end. I really did like the social commentary in here, and overall I just think it's such a beautiful, beautiful book. I found it quite profound and impactful. Look at the cover, it's so pretty. This is such a stunning book in more than one way. I really, really do recommend it. It's such a brilliant book. Book number 9 on this list is this one, and it is How Do You Live by Genzaburo Yoshino. This is the book which the next Hayao Miyazaki Studio Ghibli film is based off of. It was originally published in 1937, and it is a story about a young boy whose name is Copper. That is his nickname, which is given to him by his uncle, which is a reference to Copernicus, which I thought was really cute. And so this story follows like his coming of age and his time in school with his friends, and it weaves together Copper's story with these really like philosophical letters that his uncle sends him, which consider life and these like really big questions. It's a really unique and interesting structure. It's quite a slow book. It's a very calm, comforting book, and I can definitely see how this is going to be a Miyazaki film. Apparently this is one of his favorite childhood books, and so that's why he wanted to make it into a film. Now to book number 10, the very final book of this list, and it is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I listened to this one as an audiobook and I really, really enjoyed it. It's a sweet little story about time travel. In Tokyo, there is this very peculiar cafe and a seat within this cafe where people can time travel. However, the time travel has a lot of really like interesting rules. Most of the time, there's a ghost sitting in the time travel seat in the cafe, and so there are only very specific periods where people can time travel. You can only time travel within the cafe itself. You cannot leave the cafe, and you need to finish all of your time traveling before your coffee gets cold, otherwise you will become a ghost. This story kind of feels like a bunch of short stories woven together, like set in the cafe. We follow a bunch of different characters and how they use the time travel to explore their relationships with their loved ones and, you know, fix damaged relationships and communicate with people. There are parts of it that are quite sad and quite emotional. I really enjoyed the story. I thought it was a really lovely, mostly lighthearted take on time travel. There are bits in this that are quite sad and quite poignant, but overall it's a really enjoyable, engaging, short little book. And that's the very last book on this list. Those are all 10, or rather 11, of my favorite books by Japanese authors. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so very much for watching it, and also an enormous thank you to all of my patrons over on Patreon for supporting my channel and the creative things that I make. Take care everyone, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.